You're listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands, with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
Sudeep, we keep talking about various campaigns we've been part of, we've led, but our references are largely the top FMCG companies or top companies we worked with.
hmm
Can only large companies run campaigns, or can startups also run campaigns, or should startups kind of temper their expectations to just run ads?
Okay, interesting one. However, I beg to differ. I think in one of the episodes earlier, we covered the whole truth,
Mm-hmm.
and we were speaking about not just their ad, where they've taken on regular dark chocolate or regular chocolates of the world,
Mm-hmm.
but they'd also built an ecosystem around all of this marketing by getting into blogs and fitness YouTube channel, etc.,
Right.
and the way they had approached their influencer onboarding, etc. So
Right.
therefore that was an example of how a startup can possibly build a campaign and not just limited to running an ad.
Fair enough. But okay, let's take a step back. What's the difference between an ad and a campaign?
That's a crucial question. Ideally, every company, when they're constructing their path to purchase, they have determined how do they want to influence their consumer to produce the result that they need. Now, to effectively produce that result, they would want to make sure that the consumer conversion process is helped by as many elements as possible. Also, in some cases, the company might realize that consumer is not the only one making choices or not the only one influencing the choices, because your product is going to reach the consumers via multiple intermediaries, channel partners, influencers, sometimes for a category like paints, a painter. Also, in some of these cases, the consumer is different from the shopper. With all that realization, the company might find that they want to influence not just the consumer but also the shopper or the influencer or the intermediary. So when a company wants to, or when a brand wants to influence consumer in a holistic manner, then they should think about a campaign. And a campaign consists of multiple things and multiple touch points such that the brand objective are met at the end of it. And hence, when you said ad versus a campaign, ad is but one element of a campaign. So therefore, in common parlance, if you talk to a marketer, they call it IMC, which is integrated marketing communication. Yeah, that's a campaign. The definition is integrated marketing campaign is an approach to creating unified and seamless brand experience for consumers across channels.
Okay,
Yeah,
makes sense. So, an ad, a TVC that we're talking about, is primarily just one aspect of an IMC, or what we commonly call the campaign.
correct.
Now, let me push that a little further. We see a lot of brands doing just ads, and each ad is different. Each ad does a different job, maybe. But why are IMCs important?
See, I think for every category and for every brand, the consumer decision making journey might differ. And therefore, you would want to influence as many parts of consumer decision making journey as possible. So, therefore, number one, at different parts of consumer decision making journey, you have different touch points touching the consumer. And hence, you want something which is working towards influencing that touch point. And it might not be an advertising all the time. For example, suppose I want you to eat a particular candy. Now you are watching TV and I show you the advertising. It's an impulse purchase product. So you saw the advertising, you were impressed with it, you understood the brand benefit, and it kind of stays in your head. But it has to stay enough or stay long enough such that the next time you feel like eating candy and when you are out and about, You go to a shop and you demand that brand.
Right. That's an extension of the mental availability.
Correct. So usually that doesn't happen, because finally at the end of the day, a candy is a 1 rupee, 2 rupee kind of a product, and therefore its longevity in your head is going to be limited. And hence, the next time you go outside, you're out and about, you go to a shop, that becomes another touch point for me to be able to reinforce what I fed in your head a few days back via my advertising. And if I fail to do so, then it is possible that all my effort of creating that seed in your head will go waste and not result into any purchase.
Right.
And hence, I need a campaign which not only seeds the thought in your head, but also acts on different parts of your decision making journey, such that your consideration gets converted into purchase.
Right. Got it. You see the awareness and then you sustain that awareness right up to the point of purchase. And that would entail all these touch points that sustain this awareness or communication would make up the IMC.
Yes. Also, suppose you are a kid and I want you to buy a Kinder Joy. Yeah, remember we spoke about Kinder Joy. Now I have a proposition where I have aired an ad which speaks to kids as well as mothers. Now, a kid would obviously remember it much more than the mother. So you would expect a kid to demand. Yeah. But the final decision maker, the gatekeeper, the shopper is the mother. And hence, at the point of buying, I need to make sure that there are sufficient cues for the mother to make the decision in the favor of the brand. And hence, in this case, the campaign would make sure that there is sufficient pull amongst the kids, and then there are sufficient cues at various touch points such that the mother becomes positively disposed and finally ends up buying the product.
Right. I get what he's saying. To fire off the startup shoulders, to target one consumer, my ROAS is going through the roof, as in it's plummeting. So, does that mean if I take an IMC approach to my advertising, I would have to spend a lot more money?
I would possibly say that you are spending your money more efficiently. For example, suppose you are currently advertising only on Amazon and you're only doing discovery ads. Yeah. So therefore, you're possibly impacting consumers at the top of the funnel. Now, suppose you run that and you realize that there is a certain amount of add to basket ratio that you have. Now, if you want to improve that add to basket ratio, you would have to interject at some of the other points. And that is where the role of an IMC comes through. And the better you know your consumer, the more you empathize with her, the more knowledge you have of her purchase decision making journey, you will be able to influence that ratio even better. And that's where IMC comes in handy.
Got it. So, does that mean that I can take any communication created for my brand and turn it into an IMC?
Not necessarily. A lot of the times when I started in marketing, I made that mistake, and I now see a lot of marketers make that mistake where they first make a TVC or a digital creative, and that becomes the end all and be all of IMC, and then it is almost contingent on every medium that comes to their head to carry the same message that the TVC is carrying.
Isn't that the commonsensical thing to do?
If you don't want to put any effort, please go ahead and do it. But I'm of the firm belief that each element in IMC has a purpose, and once the purpose is clear to you, then you will be able to design it much better.
I got it. I mean, I got that you're not okay with running the same TVC, adapting the TVC or the main communication into different formats and calling it an IMC. But I'm also sure you have a framework of how it is to be done right.
Yes. So I would not call it framework. There are four considerations that I want to leave with our listeners. If they go through those before they start investing into creative and various IMC elements, I'm sure they'll be able to make significantly better choices.
Okay, let's go.
So, the purpose of these four considerations is to make sure that you are making better strategic choices while designing your IMC. We spoke about creating unified and seamless brand experience. Now, brand experience is an important word. First of all, let's concentrate on consumers. Consumers can't just be people who are finally consuming your brand. Yeah, you have to think through the entire decision making matrix. I see this dealer specifically as an excellent opportunity which most of the FMCG brands don't use very well. Now, a lot of them have started using point of sale material or POSM very well, but dealers and dealer boys or the shop boys still remain largely untapped. In 2007, Cadbury launched Bubalu. I thought it was fairly well designed launch. So Bubalu's key promise when they launched was the amount of liquid inside the gum. If you recall, their key visual had a burst of liquid emerging from the center of the gum. So a lot of the people used to be very happy that this is the gum which has the maximum amount of flavor inside. And then second thing, visually to make it come alive, they had taken help of Boba the cat. So with these two things in mind, the TVC etc. was created. Of course, for POSM, there were nice stands which would carry your jars, etc., etc. I remember one they had created Bubba the cat masks for the entire sales team, just to ensure that there is sufficient clutter breaking and the trade registers it very very well. The most impressive thing for me, honestly, was that we taught dealer how to show the differentiation between our product and a competitor product, asking the retailer to hold two gums, the competitor gum and Bubalu, in their two hands and try to squish it between the thumb and the index finger. There was significant difference between the two. But the fact is that the brand thought about one, making it come alive in front of the dealer, and number two, giving dealer an effective tool of kind of recommending to the consumer and possibly making the proposition come alive.
Right. So, was this done primarily to make up for the lack of TV advertising or to accompany the TV advertising that was happening?
My belief is accompany, because the realization was again for a 1 rupee candy, the TV advertising would be able to do only that much. Now, when the kids walk in, the dealer or the shop boy's enthusiasm would make up for whatever decay would have happened in the kids' minds after they would have seen the TVC a day or 2 day or 3 days or a week back. And to generate that enthusiasm, this particular demonstration would have given them a significant fillip. And there must have been a deep rooted conviction in the hearts of the dealer and the shop boys that this is possibly the best gum available. And hence, they would have enthusiastically sold Bubalu.
So, this could have been done to accompany the TVC, but for a startup or for a new brand, this can actually make up for the lack of money to spend on airing your ad or communication, or even without a TVC, to get your dealers on board and get your other stakeholders across the channel on board, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you could do that. What's that gonna do is TVC is very top of the funnel input. So it creates consideration in consumer's head. Now, suppose you don't have money at all to air the TVC, it's perfectly fine. So therefore, when the people are walking in, they don't have the consideration. Now you need to trigger that consideration somehow so that the dealer responds to it. In this category, it might not happen that the dealer creates the consideration.
Right. At a 1 rupee price point, a dealer is not incentivized enough to do that.
Correct. If the dealer thinks that they can create a consideration, they might as well do it for a higher priced item. And hence, you will need to put something on the point of buying so that it piques consumer interest and it creates some consideration, and then the dealer can do the job. But if you want to do it at scale, all India, across 50,000, 1 lakh shops, 10 lakh shops, then you know there is no other way outside of TV or for massive social media led advertising.
You're listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands. Your hosts are Sudeep Chawla, marketing practitioner, business leader, and educator to advertising and marketing professionals, and Sharavana Raghavan of Vitral Brand Expertise, growth consultants to consumer-facing brands and businesses. For more information, go to cobcast.com. custodian.net. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling your friends and rating us.
Who is my IMC target segment? That's the first consideration. Second consideration is from a brand experience point of view. What do you want the IMC to do? And this is a very careful choice that you have to make. In my mind, there could be three different roles that can be assigned to an IMC. The first is of a creative multiplier, the second is of a message multiplier, the third is of a message layerer or message layering. Sometimes, let me take the previous example, Bobalu. Now, Bobalu had Boba the cat. Now, if we had significant belief in the fact that Baba the cat itself is going to be very popular and it'll make sure that there is sufficient amount of consideration driven for Bobalu, we would have just said make Baba the cat big across the channel. And all our IMC would have then picked on Baba the cat and gone bonkers behind it. A good example of this is what you saw with Vodafone and Zuzu's. Zuzu's had some 12-13 ads per season of IPL. Most of us wouldn't even remember what was the exact service or the product being advertised. But we would remember Vodafone and we would remember Zuzu's. They made sure that all their ads, all their IMCs everywhere, the one thing that was available was Zuzu. So that's a great example of creative amplification. They knew that as soon as somebody sees a Zuzu, you'll be able to think of it. Or what Hutch used to do with a pug. So there are ways in which people have now found creative elements which kind of signify your product. And hence it makes sense to invest behind them. It's a perfectly legible strategy.
Absolutely. We also call it the brand assets, right? Cadbury does it best with purple. Cadbury's almost monopolized purple, that any other category that wants to sell chocolate as an inclusion ends up having to use purple on their pack, otherwise people don't believe it's got chocolate in it. And that actually works in turn to amplify Cadbury's dominance of the category. Strategic assets to amplify the creatives. So,
Correct? When you look at Shark Tank, for example, a Piyush Bansal possibly is a creative amplifier for Lenskart.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you would possibly see their IMC emerging going forward.
You're right, because if I had logged on to the Lenskart website recently, and they have a new collection called the Shark Tank collection. And basically, the styles that Piyush Bansal is worn on every episode of Shark Tank is there under a separate collection called the Shark Tank collection.
Yeah. So therefore, that is creative multiplier. Now, second could be message multiplier. You want to repeat the same message over and over again in various forms. When we had relaunched eclairs as chocolates, even the TVC that we had made, and we were clear that we wanted the consumer to have it clear in their heads that it is eclairs that has got now rebranded as chocolates. And hence we had repeatedly played the same line over and over again in the TVC also कि Cadbury eclairs बन गया है Cadbury chocolates और अब ये चिपकता नहीं है. The realization was that while you will deliver this to the consumer, there will be a decay by the time they land up at a shop to buy this. And therefore, for the first time in this category, we had a free giveaway for significant number of dealers while the product was launched, and the giveaway was a wet sponge that you can use to count the currency note, and the sponge had a branding on it saying अब note भी नहीं चिपकेंगे और chocolates भी नहीं. So similarly we had tied up with one of the radio stations to customize actor calling actor, where somebody imitates Farhan Akhtar and talks to Javed Akhtar, etc., in terms of शायरी, and the content was again around this कि ये चिपकता क्यों नहीं है. So these are messages which get repeated over and over again, and once you do that, then it starts triggering consideration for a particular brand in consumers mind. So that's what IMC can do.
Got it. What's the third part? I'm curious. What is message layering?
See, message layering comes with the reality that many of your IMC elements will only allow one message to be taken to the consumer, one or two messages at best. And you might realize that the consumer decision making process takes into account multiple other attributes. And it is easier to understand this using any high value purchase. For example, think a car. Now, when Volkswagen Vento advertises on TV, they will talk about one particular aspect of Vento, and that creates consideration. Then all their brochures, even their print ad, will have a feature led ad so that you can read through. Think about iPhone. Well, now iPhone will give you one or two very specific reasons in the TVC, yeah, which defines that particular iPhone launch. And then in the print, they will have second round of layering, which not only detail some other features, but they will also have a EMI led plan. So therefore, it is making sure that now that you are moving from consideration towards purchase, your path to purchase goes via saying that whether I buy it or I do an EMI.
Right. So they don't overload you with all the information. I get why you're saying the high value purchase, because for high value purchase, you take a lot of things into consideration. The brand chooses to not overload you with all the information, but gives you a trickle effect of the information through your consumer journey so that you're moved from one stage to the other on in a systematic manner. Brilliant. I think that's a good way to call it message layering.
Yeah. So therefore, you have decided what role will it play, who will it be targeted to. Now, third is how are you going to deliver? And on the delivery part, again, there are three parts to it. First part is reach, second is frequency, third part is impact. Suppose you want a message to reach as many people as possible. So there is a new flavor that has gotten launched. You go for a reach led plan. Usually, the things that get you maximum amount of scale are TV or social media. Yeah, everything else possibly is a subservient there. Now, when you want to talk about frequency, every brand over a period of time develops a certain understanding as to how many times do they need to show you their TVC or their creative to a TG such that the TG gets the message. What you want to do is some cases you want to keep repeating the message to people. And in those cases, your IMC would include mediums which afford you to give repeated exposure to the same TG with a very small cost. Yeah, and this is where social media as well as radio come into picture. Third is impact. Impact is something that you use to create significant amount of reach very quickly and with great amount of recall power. When people air their TVCs on IPL or properties like the Kapil Sharma show, these are all properties which are watched by significant number of users across the country. And once you air your TVC there once or twice or thrice or four times, you are pretty much sure that almost everybody who was watching the program has seen your ad. And almost everyone watching the program is possibly 50% of India or 60% of India. Now, all of these programs, it is very costly to air your TVC, and hence you will be able to show it to them only once or twice or thrice. But that once or twice or thrice is such high impact exposure because everybody is watching these programs very keenly that it might do the job of sixth or the seventh or the eighth frequency that you would have otherwise delivered. Impact usually therefore is classified as building significant amount of reach in a manner where the recall possibly will be significantly higher at a lower frequency. I have seen that whenever there is a new launch on a big brand, they prefer to go the impact way. Like Tata New. Now they plastered complete IPL. I don't think they did a great job per se, but they plastered the IPL completely with New. They wanted to announce to the world that New is here, and hence the impact. In fact, in the golden days, phone companies, Vivo, Oppo, or in the past soft drink companies, all of them have believed that impact properties worked for them when they had some kind of a new news to talk about. Even a new celebrity associated with Pepsi or a Coke is sufficient new news for them. They thrive on association. So, therefore, that's the third angle of strategically thinking about IMC. The fourth aspect, now that you've decided all of it, where all are you going to deploy it? Yeah, so therefore, this is about deployment. There are four possible options that you will have. The first option is your campaign assets. These are things that you create while you're planning for the campaign, or these are specifically created for the campaign. For example, your TVC, your digital film, your jingle. That is something which will become a part of your IMC package, of course. The second are your brand assets. Brand assets are things which are going to remain regardless of the campaign. So your website, Twitter handle, your Insta handle, all your social media accounts, etc. Those are all your brand assets. Third one in this one is shopping points.
We call them the points of purchase.
Points of purchase. Yeah. So online and offline both. Your Amazon brand store, your dealer points, etc. Those are all points of purchase. The fourth one are influence points. Now, influence points are places which are frequented by your target segment, which can be used to create a certain kind of impression or messaging amongst them. For example, college canteens, malls, or restaurants. Now, if you know that your TG is going to any of these places, you would find a way to create some kind of an IMC there. I remember when Cadbury was activating खाने के बाद मीठे में कुछ मीठा हो जाए, there's also activated significant number of restaurants where they had kept this small card or something on the table to queue that now that you've had your meal, why don't you have some meetha in form of Cadbury? So these are points which are influence points where your TG is there, they are largely receptive, etc. Yeah. So this is how you decide where are you going to deploy your IMC. Either it is on campaign elements or your campaign assets or your brand assets, your point of purchase or your influence points.
Right. So, depending on the kind of campaign you're running, you can choose to use certain channels and choose to leave out certain channels, right?
Correct.
You don't have to cover all of it all the time.
All of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
So now that you've thought through all these four, you will be significantly clearer about what you want your IMC to do, who do you want to target, what is the role amongst them, and what are the assets where you are going to deploy it. Now this gives you your creative strategy. Yeah. You, for example, after doing all of this, you might realize you don't even need a film. So therefore, all of this has to be done before you commission any kind of film or creative work.
Right. In fact, that reminds me of how Himalaya launched in India. When Himalaya launched, I don't think they had a TVC for about the first 2 years. It was completely driven by point of purchase interventions. They had POP deployment. They'd focused on the pharma channel first, then they got into the grocery channel. And 2 years after launch is when they had, so Himalaya had this grandmother talk about the riches of Ayurveda and all that. So they went 2 years without a TVC, with just the entire IMC touchpoints being taken care of.
Yeah. No, in fact, one of the things that I have always admired about a brand like, for example, Cadbury Celebrations now, it has reached a level where the TVC actually is subservient to the IMC and not the other way around. So they have, caught on to the spirit of generosity. Then they find out what is the best way of delivering generosity to people. How do they want to use technology? How do they want to build scale, etc., etc. And then the TVC is conceived. And no amount of creative genius would have come up with it unless you follow the right process of going via an IMC, making strategic choices.
Right. No way this could have started with the creative.
Absolutely not. That is what strengthens my belief in the fact that if all our listeners are able to think through their, IMC prioritization, IMC decision making, I'm sure all of them will find strategic reasons, logical reasons to make certain choices, and thereby, eliminate non-fulfilling, non-useful work.
Awesome. That's very true, Sudeep. And in fact, having an IMC mindset or thinking campaign and not just ads actually helps you spend money very efficiently. It even helps you reduce your expenses to a large extent, to a point where you do not even need a TVC. I think that's brilliant. I think you've simplified something that I actually thought was going to be very complex for the conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharan.
Thank you for listening to CoBB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's CoBBCAST.net.